The alarm clock blared, dragging me out of a restless sleep in my modest flat in Ashford, a quaint town in Kent. I stumbled to the kitchen, flicked on the news, and froze. The headline screamed, "Banks closed indefinitely." My heart sank. Not a drill, not a joke. Just like that, the place I trusted with my life savings was shut tight. No warning, no explanation. I'm Tom Harris, by the way, just your average bloke who played it safe, worked hard, saved every penny, avoided risks. But on this cold March morning in 2013, everything I thought I knew about money and security started unraveling. Ashford, nestled in the English countryside, was far from the bustling financial hubs like London or Manchester. Yet, even here, the ripple of global banking chaos hit hard. It wasn't just some distant headline. It was real, and it was personal. I poured myself a cup of black tea, trying to steady my nerves. The phone buzzed. My mate Jack, ever the joker, texted, "Looks like they've locked down the banks, mate. Maybe they're hiding the Queen's crown jewels in the vaults." I smirked despite the tension. Jack always knew how to lighten the mood. But beneath the banter, there was a gnawing fear. The news explained that the government had taken an unprecedented step, a stability levy on all deposits over $80,000. That's right, almost half of anything above that was gone, legally seized to prop up the failing banks. My thoughts raced. That $120,000 I'd saved for a rainy day. Suddenly, half of it was vaporized overnight. I grabbed my coat and headed to the local branch of Ashford Bank. The streets were oddly quiet. The bank doors were shuttered and a small crowd had gathered, whispering anxiously. Among them was a woman I'd seen around town, Emily. She was striking, dressed in a tailored navy coat that hugged her figure, her auburn hair cascading in waves, and a silver bracelet glinting on her wrist. There was something almost hypnotic about her calm demeanor amidst the chaos. Emily caught my eye and nodded faintly, a silent acknowledgement of the surreal moment we were sharing. It was like the world had tilted, and we were all trying not to fall off. As I stood there, the weight of the situation pressed down. Banks holding assets nearly 8 times the country's GDP had gambled on risky bonds, many tied to Greece's debt disaster. When those bets failed, it wasn't the tycoons or the CEOs who paid up. It was folks like me and Emily. Our money, our security, converted overnight into a bailout fund for reckless bankers. I felt a bitter irony. We were being punished for their mistakes, and the law was on their side. That day I realized something profound. The safety net I believed in was full of holes, and if this was the blueprint, no one was truly safe, not even in quiet towns like Ashford. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The pattern had been set, and it would soon echo far beyond our sleepy English streets. As I walked home, the sunset painted the sky in fiery hues, like a warning flare. Somewhere deep inside, a question burned. When would it be our turn again? And that's when my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "You don't know the half of it. Watch the news tomorrow. Things are about to get worse." The next morning I woke to a gray drizzle falling over Ashford, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. The news was everywhere, TV screens in cafes, murmured conversations on the high street, and the relentless buzz of smartphones. Emily's message from the night before echoed in my mind. Things are about to get worse. I decided to check out the town's community center, where a meeting was being held for locals to discuss the banking crisis. Inside, the room was packed, faces etched with worry, some trying to mask it with forced smiles. I spotted Emily again. Today she wore a sleek, charcoal-gray dress that hugged her curves just right, paired with understated pearl earrings and black ankle boots that clicked confidently on the wooden floor. There was an air of quiet resilience about her, like she was holding secrets she wasn't quite ready to share. The meeting kicked off with a financial advisor from London, a sharp man named Richard. He spoke plainly, but his words were chilling. "This bail-in," he said, "isn't a one-off. It's a new legal tool. Governments don't just bail out banks anymore. They bail in depositors. Your money can be seized, converted into shares, or frozen without warning." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I glanced at Emily, whose eyes were fixed on Richard, unblinking. "So, what do we do?" an elderly man asked, his voice trembling. "How do we protect ourselves?" Richard shrugged. "Diversify, hold cash, invest in real assets like property or gold. But the truth is, no one's immune." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I'd always thought my savings were untouchable, a fortress against life's storms. But now they were a target. After the meeting, Emily approached me. Her voice was low but steady. "Tom, do you know about Greece's crisis back in 2015? I nodded. "Yeah, they locked down banks, limited withdrawals. People could only get about $50 a day. Imagine that. Having money but not being able to use it," she sighed. "Exactly. That's capital controls. Your money's there, but it's trapped. It's like being given a fancy car but no keys." Her words struck a chord. We were watching history repeat itself, but this time it felt uncomfortably close. As we walked out together, the rain lightened and a faint rainbow arched over the town, a fragile promise in a world unraveling. Emily smiled just a little. "Keep your eyes open, Tom. The next steps won't be pretty." I glanced back at her, intrigued and unsettled. Who was she really? Why did she seem to know so much? And what did that message mean, the one from last night? The shadows creeping over Ashford were more than just economic. They were personal. And as the evening settled in, I realized I was about to be pulled deeper into a story far bigger than my quiet life. The following day dawned sharp and clear, but the atmosphere in Ashford had thickened, like the calm before a storm. I found myself wandering toward the town's old library, a place where the scent of worn leather and paper always comforted me. I needed answers, something solid to hold on to amid the chaos. Inside, the library's grand oak doors creaked behind me, and I spotted Emily again, seated by a window bathed in pale sunlight. Today she wore a dark emerald green blouse, its silky fabric catching the light with every subtle movement, paired with a pencil skirt that hinted at curves beneath. A delicate gold necklace rested just above her collarbone, and her eyes held that same knowing glint. She looked up as I approached, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Tom," she greeted softly, "I've been digging into this bail-in business. There's more to it than they tell us on the news." I pulled out a chair, intrigued. "Like what?" She leaned in, voice low. "It's not just banks in trouble. The whole system's built on a house of cards. Banks make risky bets, governments get into debt, and when it all collapses, guess who pays? Depositors. People like us." I nodded, but she wasn't finished. "And it's not just us losing money. Sometimes they don't even take your cash directly. They convert it into shares. Shares in a bank that's probably worth less than the paper they print the certificates on." I blinked. "So my savings could become, what? A worthless stock?" Emily's smile turned wry. "Exactly. You go to sleep one night with a nice balance in your account and wake up owning a slice of a sinking ship. And good luck selling those shares when no one wants to buy." A chill ran down my spine. I glanced around the library as if expecting someone to overhear. "Is there anything we can do? I mean, besides hoarding cash under the mattress?" She chuckled softly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Diversify, spread your money around, keep some in physical assets if you can, but mostly, you have to be ready. Because when the next crisis hits—" She paused, looking out the window. It's not just savings on the line. It's everything. Just then, the library's old grandfather clock chimed, marking the hour. Emily's gaze snapped back to me. By the way, have you heard about what happened in London last week? I shook my head. A man stormed a bank branch with a gun, she said quietly. Demands to withdraw his own money. People are desperate, Tom. This isn't just theory anymore. Her words hung heavy between us. The quiet town of Ashford suddenly felt like a tinderbox ready to ignite. As I left the library, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Tired, uncertain, but awake to a harsh new reality. The safe world I'd known was slipping away, and Emily's parting words echoed. When it all falls apart, who will you trust? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. That evening, the pub was unusually crowded for a Tuesday night. The familiar scent of polished wood, spilled ale, and laughter mixed with a tense undercurrent I couldn't quite place. I slid onto a stool at the bar, ordering a pint of bitter, hoping the amber warmth would dull the knot tightening in my chest. Emily was already there, sitting alone near the fireplace. Tonight she wore a deep red dress that clung to her like it was painted on, the fabric shimmering subtly as she shifted. Her black heels tapped softly against the floor, a contrast to the old stone beneath. A slender silver chain traced the delicate curve of her neck, disappearing beneath the dress's modest neckline. She caught my eye and beckoned me over with a single finger, a sly smile teasing at the corners of her lips. "Thought you might need a drink," she said, voice smooth like velvet but edged with something urgent. I lowered my voice. "Emily, what's really going on? This bail-in thing, the freezes, the bank seizures. It feels like a nightmare nobody can wake up from." She leaned closer, the warm glow of the fire flickering across her face, casting shadows that made her look both dangerous and irresistible. "It's worse than you think, Tom. The government's not just protecting banks, they're protecting the entire system. Your money is the first line of defense when everything starts to crumble." I swallowed hard. So, they take our money to keep the banks afloat, and we're just supposed to accept it? She laughed, a low, almost mischievous sound. "Accept it? No, mate. You fight it. But first, you have to understand it. Did you know there's already a law on the books that allows this? Dodd-Frank passed back in 2010 after the last crash. It gives the FDIC the power to convert deposits into bank shares without asking anyone's permission. I shook my head in disbelief. Sounds like legalized theft. Exactly. She sipped her wine. And digital banking makes it even easier. One panic, one viral tweet, and billions can vanish from accounts in minutes. No lines, no queues, just empty screens and heart attacks. I looked around the pub, noticing the quiet conversations, the worried glances. We were all sitting on a powder keg. Emily's eyes locked onto mine. "There's more, Tom. The banks hold trillions in bonds that have tanked thanks to rising interest rates. Commercial property values are collapsing too. It's a perfect storm brewing." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "And when it hits here..." She smiled, but it wasn't reassuring. "Then the bail-in kicks in. Your savings turn into shares in a bank worth pennies. Or worse, capital controls lock your money away, only allowing you a few quid a day. Or your account just freezes, and you're left staring at numbers that might as well be monopoly money." The fire crackled between us, filling the heavy silence. Outside, a late autumn wind rattled the windows like a warning knock. I glanced at Emily, suddenly aware how close she was. "Why are you telling me all this?" Her eyes softened for a moment. "Because this isn't just a story in the papers, Tom. It's coming. And when it does, you'll need to know who to trust and who to watch." Just then, the pub door burst open, and a man in a soaked trench coat staggered in, gasping for breath. His eyes darted wildly as he locked onto Emily, then me. "Did you hear?" he panted. "They're planning capital controls, starting next week. Limits on withdrawals, transfers, the lot." Emily's smile faded. "Looks like the time's closer than we thought." I took a long gulp of my bitter, the taste bitter in more ways than one. The quiet life of Ashford was unraveling fast, and I was right in the middle of it. The following morning, Ashford awoke under a thick blanket of fog that clung to the cobblestone streets, muffling sounds and casting everything in a ghostly haze. I stepped outside, the chill biting through my coat, and made my way to the local market. It was usually a lively place on Wednesdays, but today the stalls were half empty, faces drawn tight with worry. I spotted Emily near a fruit stand, selecting a few ripe apples with deliberate care. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, a few tendrils escaping to frame her face, softening the sharp intensity in her eyes. She wore a cream-colored trench coat, cinched at the waist, and her boots clicked firmly against the damp pavement as she moved. Even in the fog she seemed to glow, a beacon in the murk. "Morning," I called, approaching cautiously. She looked up, offering a small smile. "Morning, Tom. Heard the news?" I shook my head. "Last night, the Chancellor announced new financial measures. Capital controls are coming, limits on withdrawals, transfers capped, and restrictions on moving money abroad. They want to stop the bank runs before they start." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So it's real, then. They're locking down our money." Emily nodded, biting her lip. "It's happened before. In Cyprus, Greece. People could only get a few dozen pounds a day. Imagine trying to buy groceries or pay rent on that." A shiver ran down my spine, and I tried to smile. "Well, at least we're not on a Mediterranean island or in the middle of a debt crisis, right?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Ashford might be quiet, but we're tied into the same system. The banks here have exposure to risky loans, and this time no one's immune. The big players in London, the regional banks, they're all on thin ice." I looked around, noticing the hurried steps of shoppers, the whispered phone calls. "Have you started moving your money?" I asked. Emily hesitated, then reached into her bag, pulling out a slim envelope. "Some cash, yes, enough to get by if the worst happens, but cash alone won't save you. You need a plan, a way to protect what you have." Her voice lowered, conspiratorial. "And you need to know the signs. When the government starts talking about financial stability and emergency measures, that's when you really need to worry." I swallowed hard. "What do you suggest?" She glanced around, then leaned in. "Spread your money across different banks. Keep some in physical assets, gold, property, even some foreign accounts if you can. And keep some cash hidden, like a secret stash." I couldn't help but smirk. "Sounds like I'm turning into a proper paranoid." Emily laughed softly, the sound a balm against the creeping dread. "Paranoia's just good sense these days." As we parted ways, the fog began to lift, revealing the familiar spires and chimneys of Ashford. But beneath that familiar skyline, a storm was gathering, one that promised to rewrite everything we thought we knew about money, trust, and survival. And in the back of my mind, Emily's words echoed, "When the banks close their doors, will your savings still be yours?" That evening, the sky over Ashford was a bruised purple, clouds gathering like a threat. I found myself back at the pub, nursing a half-empty glass of whiskey, the warmth doing little to chase away the growing unease inside me. The usual chatter was subdued, conversations drifting toward the impending financial clampdown. Emily arrived just as the clock struck 8, slipping into the seat beside me with effortless grace. Tonight, she wore a sleek black blouse, unbuttoned just enough to hint at the curve of her neck, paired with tailored trousers that emphasized her long legs. A delicate silver ring sparkled on her finger as she traced the rim of her glass thoughtfully. "Did you hear?" she asked, voice low. I shook my head. The government's drafting emergency legislation, capital controls, bail-ins. They're preparing the legal framework to seize deposits if banks fail. It's more than talk now, Tom. It's imminent. I set my glass down, heart pounding. How bad can it get? Emily leaned closer, eyes sharp and serious. Remember Cyprus? Nearly half the deposits over a certain amount were taken, converted into shares. People lost everything overnight. Greece trapped people's money for years with daily withdrawal limits. Lebanon's banks froze accounts for 6 years and counting. And now, the UK could be next. A shiver ran through me, partly from the cold, partly from the weight of her words. So, what can we do? I asked, desperate for any lifeline. She smiled thinly. Prepare. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Spread your money across multiple banks. Keep some cash hidden away. Invest in assets that can't be frozen. Property, gold, even art if you can swing it. I swallowed hard. And if they freeze everything anyway? Emily's gaze softened, but there was steel beneath. Then you fight. But you have to be ready. Knowledge is your best weapon. Just then the pub door swung open, and a group of suited men entered, their presence commanding immediate attention. Whispers followed them, government officials, no doubt here to assess the mood, the pulse of a town on edge. Emily's eyes narrowed. They're watching us, Tom, not just here but everywhere. I felt a sudden chill, as if the walls themselves were closing in. As the night deepened, the line between friend and foe blurred. Trust became a precious commodity, and I realized that surviving the coming storm would require more than just cash and caution. It would demand courage, cunning, and maybe a little luck. Steeling myself, I asked, "What's the first move?" Emily's smile was enigmatic, almost a challenge. "Watch. Listen. And when the banks open their doors again, don't believe a word they say." Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the promise of a reckoning, and somewhere in the shadows a secret waited to be uncovered, one that could change everything. The sun rose weak and pale over Ashford, casting long shadows across the town square as I made my way to the bank, if you could still call it that. The building, once a proud symbol of stability, with its grand stone pillars and polished brass handles, now looked like a fortress bracing for a siege. The heavy oak doors were barred from the inside, and a hastily scrawled sign warned, "Limited access, capital controls in effect." I stood in line with a handful of others, faces drawn tight with anxiety and quiet frustration. Among them was Emily, dressed today in a soft beige trench coat that fluttered slightly in the chilly breeze, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her emerald eyes scanned the crowd, alert and calculating. She wore simple pearl studs and a thin leather bracelet that caught the sunlight, a subtle reminder that even in crisis, there's a semblance of normalcy. As we shuffled forward, a bank teller emerged, her navy uniform crisp but her smile forced. "Good morning, folks. Due to new regulations, withdrawals are limited to $200 per day. Transfers abroad are suspended indefinitely. We ask for your patience during this transition." A collective groan rippled through the line. I glanced at Emily, who gave me a small, resigned nod. When it was my turn, I handed over my card, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd like to withdraw $200, please." The teller typed silently, then slid a thick envelope across the counter. I peeked inside. Notes, crisp but insufficient. As I counted, the weight of the reality hit hard. This was my money, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Emily was next. She withdrew her limit with quiet efficiency, then slipped me a folded note as she passed. "Read this when you get home," she whispered. Curious and a little uneasy, I tucked it into my coat pocket. Outside, the fog had lifted, revealing a sky smeared with bruises of purple and gold. The town seemed smaller somehow, as if the world was shrinking around us. Back in my flat, I unfolded Emily's note. It was a list: names, dates, bank branches, and cryptic annotations. At the bottom, a single sentence: "Follow the money and you'll find the truth." My mind raced. What truth? Who had written this? And what was Emily hiding? A sudden knock at the door made me jump. I peeked through the peephole. No one there. Just a small envelope slipped under the door. Inside, another note. "They're watching. Trust no one." My hands trembled. The quiet life I'd known was gone. The banking crisis was no longer a distant headline. It was a shadow creeping into every corner of Ashford, and somewhere beneath the surface, a conspiracy was unraveling, one that could shatter everything. I folded the notes carefully, steeling myself for what came next, because this was no longer just about money. It was about survival. The next morning, the usual hum of Ashford's high street was replaced by an eerie silence. Windows were shuttered, shopkeepers whispered behind closed doors, and the local cafe where I often grabbed my morning coffee was conspicuously empty. The Capitol controls had slammed down like a steel trap, squeezing the lifeblood from the town's daily rhythm. Emily and I met near the old clock tower, its hands frozen at 9:10, a silent reminder that time was standing still for all of us. She wore a soft cream sweater, casually unbuttoned at the collar, paired with dark jeans that hugged her slender legs. Her hair, usually so perfectly styled, was tousled by the chill wind, lending her a raw, vulnerable edge that made me catch my breath. A simple silver locket hung around her neck, glinting faintly in the weak sunlight. "Tom," she said, voice low but urgent, "we can't just sit here waiting for the system to collapse. We need to act." I nodded, feeling the weight of her determination. "But what can we do? The banks have us by the throat." Emily's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "Not all banks are equal. Some are already starting to crack. If we can find the right ones, the small cracks could become a breaking point." She pulled a folded map from her bag, spreading it out on the cold stone beside the clock tower. Red circles marked certain branches, notes scribbled in the margins. "Vulnerable, high risk, watch closely." "The bail-in law means your deposits can be converted into shares," she explained. "But not all banks are equally exposed. If we can identify the weak spots, maybe we can predict where the next collapse will happen." I frowned. "Sounds risky." "What if we get it wrong?" Emily smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "Sometimes you have to play the game to survive it." As we studied the map, a figure approached, a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. He stopped a few feet away, eyes flicking between us and the map. "Looking for answers?" he asked, voice gravelly. I tensed, but Emily remained calm. "Depends on who's asking." He smiled thinly. "Call me Reynolds. I've been watching the same pattern. The system's rotten, and those in power will sacrifice anyone to keep it standing, even if it means stealing from their own people." Emily's gaze sharpened. "What do you want?" "To help," he said simply. "But you'll need more than maps and whispers. You'll need proof, and that means getting inside the banks." My heart thudded. "You mean breaking in?" He shrugged. "Call it investigative work. The truth won't come knocking politely." Emily exchanged a look with me, equal parts excitement and caution. The game had changed, and the next move could cost us everything. The night was thick with fog as we slipped through the quiet streets of Ashford, shadows stretching long beneath the flickering street lamps. I could still taste the sharp tang of adrenaline in my mouth. This wasn't some reckless adventure. It was a desperate gamble. Emily led the way, her silhouette graceful and sure, dressed in a fitted black leather jacket that caught the faint light, paired with dark jeans and boots that barely made a sound on the damp pavement. A slender silver chain glinted at her throat, a subtle contrast against the dark fabric. Reynolds followed behind us, his presence a low rumble of calm in the tense air. He glanced around cautiously, then nodded toward the bank we were approaching, the very branch Emily had circled red on her map. "This is it," she whispered. "If we can access their internal records, we might find evidence of how deep the bail-in plan goes, and who's really pulling the strings." I swallowed hard. The grand stone facade loomed before us, windows dark and foreboding. The brass plaque gleamed dully. Ashford Trust Bank. Reynolds produced a small toolkit, fingers nimble despite the cold. "I've done this before," he muttered, more to himself than us. Minutes felt like hours as the lock clicked open. We slipped inside, the stale scent of old paper and polished wood wrapping around us. Emily's eyes flicked to the rows of filing cabinets and computer terminals. "We need the digital records, the ones that show the planned bail-in percentages and the designated accounts." Reynolds moved swiftly, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Almost there." Suddenly, a faint creak echoed from the back room. I froze. Emily's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. "Stay calm," she breathed. From the shadows emerged a security guard, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Reynolds stepped forward, voice steady. "Evening. Just checking the systems." The guard's gaze lingered, suspicion flickering, but then he nodded and moved on. We exhaled collectively. Reynolds pulled up a file named Bail-in Protocol 2025. My eyes scanned the screen. Names, amounts, percentages. The numbers were staggering. Depositors' funds earmarked for conversion into shares, some accounts flagged as priority targets. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is it. Proof." But just as we began downloading the files, the computer buzzed. A warning. "Firewall triggered," Reynolds cursed. "They're on to us." The screen went black. A siren wailed outside. "We've been made," Emily hissed. Heart pounding, we grabbed what we could and bolted into the night. As we disappeared into the fog, I realized the truth we'd uncovered was more dangerous than I'd imagined, and someone powerful was determined to keep it buried. The countdown had begun. Rain hammered against the windows of my flat as I sat, hunched over my laptop, the stolen files flickering on the screen like a beacon in the storm. Emily was beside me, her fingers dancing over the keyboard, decrypting layers of encrypted data. Her dark hair fell loose around her face, damp strands clinging to her neck, and her eyes burned with fierce determination. The soft hum of the computer was punctuated only by the occasional thunderclap outside. "We've got it all," she said, voice steady but urgent. "Names, dates, amounts, evidence that the bail-in isn't just a contingency plan. It's already in motion." I leaned back, heart hammering. "So, the government's ready to take our money, convert our savings into worthless shares, and trap us with capital controls, and no one will be safe." Emily nodded. "Exactly. But there's more. This goes higher than we thought. Some of the key players are insiders, bank executives, politicians, people who stand to profit from the collapse." A sudden crash of thunder shook the building. The lights flickered and the room plunged into darkness for a heartbeat before the backup generator kicked in. I glanced nervously toward the door. "Do you think they know we have this?" She met my gaze, eyes sharp and unyielding. "They do now." A sharp knock echoed through the flat, rattling the door frame. "Tom," Emily whispered, tension slicing through her calm, "we don't have much time." I moved to the window, peering into the rain-soaked street. Shadows shifted, figures lurking just out of clear sight. The walls were closing in. "We need to get this out. Make it public," Emily said, her voice fierce. "But first, we have to survive the night." As the storm raged outside, I realized this was more than a fight for money. It was a battle for truth, for justice, for the future. And the next move belonged to us. But somewhere beneath the roar of thunder, a darker force was mobilizing, a a silent threat waiting to strike. The question hung heavy in the air. How far would they go to keep the secret buried? And when the next crisis hit, would anyone be ready? Because the pattern was clear. The law was in place, and history was about to repeat itself. Only this time the stakes were higher than ever. The shadows were closing, and the game was just beginning.